I'm Sherry Kafka Wagner, and I was born on 9/11/1936 in a little rural community outside of Jonesboro, Arkansas, a little community called Herman. I came to San Antonio to work on Hemisphere 68. I had come to Trinity to give a talk, and in the audience for the talk were some of the people from the Hemisphere who were getting it underway. And they called me and said, would you like to have a job in San Antonio? I'd never even thought of San Antonio. I mean, I didn't grow up in Texas. I had come here and spent a few years going to school, and then I went to Iowa, to the Writers' Workshop at the University of Iowa, and I just returned from Iowa, and San Antonio, but I was excited about the idea of a World's Fair. I thought, now that's going to be really interesting to see how they put on a World's Fair. So I signed up, came to San Antonio, and that was in August of 1966. What really interested me, when I came to work here, I was dead set on spending my life being a writer. And actually, I got here in August, and that September, my first novel was published, just a little over a month after I came here. So I went to New York for all the exciting things that do with publishing your first novel. And I was saying, yes, I'm doing this job at the fair just because I needed a job and I needed an income, but I'm going to get to work on my next novel. But what happened is I became really fascinated with urbanization, with cities, and with how, you know, a World's Fair is very interesting. It's like you cut a slice through the community, and you see everything. You see education, you see transportation, you see politics, you see hospitality, industry. There's nothing it doesn't touch. You know, you see how the sewers work, taxes, money, everything, banking. So I became really interested. And when I was in high school, I remember reading something where it said that any writer should write the story of their time and place. And I had written in my notebook that I thought the story of my time and place was going to be about the urbanization of the South and the Southwest. And so I had before me this amazing example of the urbanization process, and I got very interested, and so I kind of took a turn in my life. And also I met and married Cy Wagner, who was the urban designer who had done the beginning of the Riverwalk. And so then we got a big grant and we did the 30-year plan for the development of the whole river. And it took 40 years, but it's all happened. And so that was, so when I went to the fair, I worked on making that proposal, and then I worked on that plan. And I got into doing urban work and started going around and talking about urban projects and urbanization and city design and urban planning. And then I started getting offers from people to work on urban projects, and so I spent a large part of my life doing that.
I became fascinated with how narratives underline even complicated long-term projects like the San Antonio River or the Market District. I began listening for stories, for how people's lived experience yields ideas necessary to shape sustainable projects. For example, the successful revitalization efforts of Chattanooga began with the first step, creating a unique freshwater Tennessee aquarium to tell the story of how water moves from the Smoky Mountains through the Tennessee River to the Gulf of Mexico. When working on projects in many places and several countries like this project in Kuwait, I learned each place had a unique story based on its history and culture, something only that place could tell. Here at the new Scientific Center, we included a dock with historic Kuwaiti boats that had sailed for thousands of years.
I stayed in San Antonio until 1974, and then we moved to Austin. My husband became a professor in the architecture school at UT, and I took a job writing a television show called Carrasco Lindas, a bilingual children's show that we produced at the television station, which was KLRN then, and it was KLRN in Austin and KLRN here. So I worked on that show, and and then I continued doing urban design projects too. So I stayed in Austin until 1980, and at that time I became the Loeb Fellow in the Graduate School of Design at Harvard. And so I went to Cambridge. I loved Cambridge, and it was really interesting to be at Harvard. The most divine thing in the world is to be a Harvard Fellow, because you have all the privileges of faculty and none of the responsibilities. You don't have to teach anything, but you can go. You can go to all the faculty events you're invited. You're allowed to participate. Go to the faculty club and have your breakfast. It's a great deal. You also have all the privileges of being a student, but you don't have to do any of the papers or take any of the tests. You don't have any of the responsibilities of being a student. Now, you do have to get a professor's permission for you to sit in on a class, but my goodness, they had some wonderful teachers, amazing, the quality of the instruction. What I realized is that the people who go to Harvard are not smarter than people anywhere, but they are better instructed. They're very well instructed, and that's a wonderful thing. And so to have that privilege of being able to attend these classes and go to these lectures and see the amazing work that so many of these people did, it was very, very much a privilege and very gratifying. I stayed there until 1999. And I came to San Antonio. I got a house here. For 4 years, I went back and forth. I still kept my place in Cambridge. And then I finally came here full time. There were some real advantages to coming back. My family was that was the big impetus for me coming back. And I got to be with my family, and that was wonderful. And I got to see my grandchildren grow up, and I got to drive them to school and to soccer matches and to different things and take part in their special activities, and that was really wonderful. And I got to reacquaint myself with some old friends and make a lot of new friends. But I did miss Cambridge. It's a very interesting place, and and I tell you what I really missed the most was public transportation. Oh my goodness. I did not realize until I came back what a difference it makes having really good public transportation. And so having to drive everywhere was kind of, I'm still struggle with that because everything is so spread out and there's so much driving, although it's easy to live in San Antonio. And of course, I'm very fond of San Antonio, but I would give anything if we had a good public transit system here. When Phil Hardberger was running for mayor, I said to Phil, okay, Phil, there's two things that, because we were giving a party, my daughter and I were giving a fundraising party for him, and I said, there's two things I really want to see. I want to see Hemisphere recaptured, and it's just terrible. It's moldering there. That was a really upsetting thing when I came back and saw that it was just neglected and terrible, and the Women's Pavilion had been neglected and all these things, and I was so sad. And I said, I want that. And the second thing is, I really hope that the Riverwalk is going to be finished. And he said, well, you know, we're going to work on those things. And of course, they did the museum reach, and then the wonderful work that Nelson Wolff has done in the southern part of the river. And then Hemisphere is underway for revitalization, so that made me very happy to see that happening. And one of the things that, for things to happen in a city that are ambitious and have some scope, there has to be a vision that carries over from, you know, you're never going to get it done in one time or one group of people or one term. So the people who are at the end of a process will not be the same people that were there at the beginning. But you have to have a vision and a kind of a map. And I think that's what we did with the Riverwalk and with the San Antonio River Commission. That, you know, the group that we really had a kind of a vision that was set out early. And my dear friend Sally Buchanan was very important in that, and she was there in the beginning when we were, you know, doing that early work, and then she was on the board for the river, and to see the way that, you know, the work is carried on by others and modified and grows, and that's the way it has to be. Otherwise, cities, if it's not like that, cities can't do these big ambitious projects. So, and I think that was what really got me about Hemisphere, is that it was such a wonderful and amazing and audacious and brave and courageous and important thing to do, but then it kind of just stopped. And then having it start again, you know, is really good, because I think it's important that these things go on. But there was never a real vision for what would happen after the Hemisphere, so it had to stop and then wait a period and then start again. Whereas the Riverwalk, I think, by having that vision, so I learned something very important when I worked in other communities, as to how you get an ambitious project done. I think probably what I'm most proud of is that I always did work that I cared deeply about, and that I was allowed to have a life of independence, and that I was able to make an independent life for myself, and that I was able to work creatively on a lot of different things. And I was able to work a lot of different places and meet a lot of different people, and that, you know, I never woke up any morning and thought, oh God, another day, another routine, you know, no. It didn't mean it was stress-free. I mean, very often there would be, you know, I'd wake up and go, oh my goodness, what are we going to do about this? But it was all something I wanted to do, something I cared about doing, and it had meaning for me. And so, you know, I tell you, when I was growing up in the 50s, the idea was that girls were given a script, and you were to live out that script. And that was what we were all trying to do, and we were all making an effort. And it was with a lot of angst and turmoil and pain that I came to the realization that I was going to tear up that script, throw it away, and write my own script. And so I think I'm proudest of the fact that I was able to write my own script and to be the author of my own life. I'll tell you, this is very interesting. Someone once asked William Faulkner that question, what's the book that you like best? And he said, what I'm working on now. And that's exactly how I am. Right now, I'm so excited about working on the oceanarium in Cabo Verde, Cape Verde. And I'm very excited about doing a film on Paul Baker, who was my teacher, and a great educator and a great theater artist here in Texas. So right now, I'm thinking about them all the time, and that's kind of the way it is. I'm not sure that I could ever really rank it, because there's been something wonderful for me in all the work that I've done. And I've been so lucky and so fortunate to be able to work in lots of different areas and on lots of different kinds of projects and with lots of different people. So that's been nice. And one of the things is that the people you work with and the relationships you establish over time, you know, it's really wonderful. Like Lonnie Bunch, who's now the head of the Smithsonian. Well, I worked with Lonnie when he was just a young curator starting out at the Smithsonian Museum of American History. And then I worked with the American History Workshop on the slavery exhibit when he was the director, and he was putting together the African American Museum. Now he's head of the whole Smithsonian. And so it's so wonderful. You know, you meet these people and you work with them, and the relationships continue. You have time with these people, and there's just been so many people like that I've been so blessed and lucky to have in my life. Well, one of the people really interesting that I met was Wink Wright, who was the nephew of the Wright brothers. Fabulous man, fabulous gentleman, and just so interesting and articulate. And I worked in Dayton first on the Carolyn Historical Park and making that into an important place, and they brought National Park in. And then I worked on the centennial of the Wright brothers and did the planning there. So I spent quite a bit of time with him, and oh my goodness, learning about the Wright brothers and about the Wright family and about not only what everybody knows, but a lot of stuff people don't know was just amazing. I mean, I every time I had a time to sit and talk with him, I would leave just thinking what a lucky person I was. Well, for one thing, I learned about their mother. Their mother was the only child of a very well-known carriage maker. Now, you know, you remember when automobiles started, remember that some automobiles used to have body by Fisher? Well, it meant that the carriage makers became the people who were making the interiors of automobiles. But so her father was a very famous carriage maker, and she was the only child. And so she spent a lot of time with her dad and a lot of time and learned all kinds of things, and she was mechanically gifted and had some real abilities. The father of the Wright brothers was hopeless. He could not do anything. He was a preacher, and he was a good speaker, and he was a very bright man, and really believed in his children's creativity and all. But the mother, she made her own household appliances when other people didn't have appliances, and she was really smart and able to do all that kind of engineering and thinking through technical problems. And so she was the boys' go-to. When they had a problem with their printing company or their bicycle company, they'd go talk to their mom, and she would help them figure it out. And so she was really that sort of technical person, and the one who was the engineering guide to them, and not their father. I think the most important thing that happened to me, and the most important person I ever met, was Paul Baker, who was was head of the drama department at Baylor when I went to school, and then he was later here at Trinity. He also started the Dallas Theater Center and founded the Booker T. Washington School of the Arts in Dallas. And the critical thing with Baker, I arrived at Baylor at 18 years old, and I took his course. It was the first course, my first day, called Integration of Abilities. And in that course, Paul Baker believed everybody was creative. Everybody had creative energy, but everybody was creative in their own way. And so the course was designed to help you learn how your mind works. And Paul Baker would say to us, if you know how your mind works, one thing, you learn how to recognize how other people's minds work. And you learn how to work on anything. Doesn't matter what it is. The content is not what's important, it's the creative process. The process is what's important. And you don't work toward an expected result. You don't know where you're going to end up. You just know where you're going to start. That's all. So that was my very first course, and I have, everything I've done has come out of that course. And I use ideas and things I learned from Paul Baker every day of my life. And when Harvard Press published the book, What the Best College Teachers Do, which was written by Ken Bain, who's head of the Center for Excellence in Education at New York University, the main professor in there is Paul Baker, because he was so critical to so many people for this particular course that he designed that was enabled you to do that. There's no way you can get interested in how your mind works and the creative process of your mind without getting interested in how other people's minds work. And so, and very often you hear a lot about individual creativity, and a lot of stuff is written about it, but almost nothing about collaborative creativity. And almost nobody talks about that or writes about it or teaches about it. And that was great because Baker was a theater artist. So we learned a lot about collaborative creativity. And I think that's one reason I've always been able to have work, is because I had some understanding of how to work creatively and collaboratively. And I think for a lot of people that's hard because they never got that opportunity. I would share the wisdom that you are creative, and what you need to do is learn about your mind and about how it works, and give yourself as many opportunities as possible to work with others and to learn about how their minds work. And also, but the main thing is to know that you can write your own script. You do not have to take what other people have told you and what they have said is the right way and the path that they have chosen for you, but you can in fact, it's not easy, but you can in fact choose your own path and create your own way and write your own script. And that I think is especially important for young people to know, because it's hard sometimes to, you just feel that you must do what everybody wants you to do. And I think giving people the courage to follow their own dreams in their own ways is important. Books are the core of they're the spine of my life. My earliest memory of being interested in language, and my earliest experiences were, loving stories. I've always loved stories. Unfortunately, growing up in Arkansas in a rural-oriented family, the people in the hills of Arkansas, they're great storytellers, and even their songs are stories, and everybody in my family were good storytellers. And the oral tradition was very strong. Books were not. Books were not a part, except for the Bible, which is a great treasure trove of stories. There were not books in my household. That just wasn't part of the lifestyle. And very often when you're in small rural communities, as I was growing up, you don't always have easy access to books. When I did, because I moved around, the first time I never will forget, I was in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and we had moved there, and I was right before my 10th birthday. And my mother took me to the library, and it was the most wonderful building. I must say, I will always be fond of Andrew Carnegie because he gave money to make wonderful libraries all over America. And this was a beautiful library, beautiful building. And I'd never been in a space like that. And it was so lovely. And all those books, I was like, oh. And so the woman told me at the library that I could take books home with me. And I was like, I can take them home? And she said, yes, because you're a citizen. And this library is for everybody who's a citizen. They can take books home with them. And I was like, I'm a citizen? And at that moment, it became very important to me to be a citizen, to citizenship. I felt the responsibility, and I felt the privilege of citizenship. And those books, and I could take them home and read books. And that was a very pivotal moment in my life. And that's one reason I care about the communities and the way a community is structured, because I know that the kinds of things you supply, the kinds of opportunities you make available to your citizens really are incredibly important. So books, always, and reading, and sometimes what I read in books was more real to me than what was happening in real life. And they've always been important to me. And always a way for me to, when I'd get interested in something or hear about something, I could always go to a book. And now, of course, there's a lot more opportunities with the internet and everything, but when I was growing up, and then, you know, when I had children, I wanted to make books available to them, and so, but books are just fall out of my life, you know. I never set out to have a library. I never intended, and I never ever bought a book thinking, oh, I need this book for my library. I mean, every book I bought, and I bought because there was something about that book. Someone said to me, did you read all these books? And I said, no, but I read in all these books. There was something I read in all the books, and many of them I did read all the way through. So that was, they to me were, like I said, that my whole life can be seen in these books, that they're the kind of evidence that fell out of the way I lived and the way I thought.